Hi everyone, this is Heather. Thanks so much for joining me. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a look at the brand new ink pads from Spectrum Noir. These are their Harmony Opaque Pigment pads. Because they're pigment, that means that they're slow drying, so they're perfect for techniques like heat embossing and ink blending, and of course you can also just regularly stamp with them as well. I've spread some of them out on my table just to give you an idea of some of the colors. Here's a look at what the pads look like. They're oval. On the front it has an example of the color and the color name. And what I really like is that on the edge you also have the color. So these pads are stackable. And so when they're stacked up, you can still see on the edge what the colors are. The pad inside is a foam pad, and you can see how really pretty and lush that color is. Using these ink pads today, I'm going to be making this fun little unicorn shaker card. I'm going to be doing some heat embossing and some ink blending and just some regular stamping, just to show you all the things that you can do with these ink pads. Today I'm going to be using both the white and the black inks, Pale Fig, Pink Tulip, and Fuchsia. From Lawn Fawn I'm using a little sprinkle stamp set. It's got the cute little unicorn and a couple little fairies and some sparkles and some great words. I'm using the stamps and the coordinating dies. I'm also using an oval die that's about 2.5 inches high, as well as a stitched cloud die. This is from Amuse. Because the stamps are smaller, I wanted a little bit of a small card, so I'm doing a 4x4. So I've just got a piece of bright pink cardstock cut to 4x8. I have some pieces of vellum, a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock for my ink blending. This is 3 1/4 by 3 1/4. Purpley lavender gray cardstock, and the layering color is 3 1/2 by 3 1/2. And then a strip for die cutting. And then for my stamping and embossing, I'm using just some 110-pound weight white cardstock. The first thing that I'm going to do is stamp these little sparkles around the edge of the front of my cardstock base. I wanted to show you how nicely this color shows up even on a darker colored cardstock. So I'm just going to continue all the way around, taking some of these off the edge. So now moving on to my piece of Bristol Smooth, I have a blending brush and I'm using that same fuchsia color, and I'm going to pick up some of that ink color and working on a scratched piece of paper here. I'm just going to swirl in light swirling motions, and I'm going to add that pretty dark color about 1/3 or 1/4 of the way down my cardstock, and just get a nice pretty blend on that. With my fuchsia down, I'm moving on to Pale Fig, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to kind of come in from the side a little bit on this and pull in that color and kind of blend it in with the fuchsia. So one thing I did want to mention is because these are pigment inks, and that means that they dry slowly, it is going to take a little while for them to dry on your cardstock. So while you're doing your ink blending, you don't want to touch it very much because you could end up with a little bit of a fingerprint. If that happens, that's okay. You can just go right back over that ink and blend that back out again. So with the fig laid down, I'm moving on to Pink Tulip, and I'm just going to kind of hold the cardstock by the edges just a little bit, just so that I don't get too many fingerprints on there while it's still a little wet. So laying down that tulip, if you need to, you can go back to the center color and just kind of blend those in a little bit better, and you can get some nice buildable blendable coverage with these, so you can just keep on building up that color as much as you would like. So I hope you can see how that's got that really pretty blended color in there. You can also probably see how it's still a little bit shiny because it is a little bit wet. It's also because the Bristol Smooth has a bit of a coating on it. So what I like to do is take my heat gun, and mine actually has a high-low setting. I like to use the low setting, and I'm just going to heat set this ink so I'm not going to smear it or mess it up or anything. With my ink dry, I'm going to take my oval die and tape that in place and run that through my die cutting machine. I'm going to save the oval that I die cut out for another project. Going back to the same little sparkle stamp and the fuchsia ink. And I'm just going to randomly stamp a few more of those sparkles over my ink blending. I'm going to set this aside, and I've got a thin strip of vellum that's about 5.5 by 1 1/4. And then I also have a strip of that kind of lavender gray. This is 3 1/4 by 1 1/4. And I'm going to take my cloud die with some repositionable tape, and I'm going to tape that in place and run that through my die cutting machine. And now I'm also going to do the same with the vellum and run that through as well. I've brought over the white ink and the gray cloud that I've die cut, and I've placed it on my scratch piece of paper, and using another blending brush, I just want to add some white to the top. It just gives it a little bit of contrast and really makes it look like pretty white fluffy clouds. So with that white added to my clouds, I've just put a little bit of tape runner on the back. I've brought over my oval die cut piece, and I'm just going to lay that cloud down over top. Now I'm going to grab the vellum piece that I die cut with the cloud die, and I'm going to kind of line it up over there and kind of figure out like where it looks the best, and I'm going to fold it around the edge of that and make some little creases. Now I'm going to get my other piece of vellum. It is about 2 3/4 by 2 3/4. I'm just going to kind of, for now, lay it behind my oval just to give me an idea of where I would like to stamp. Going back to that fuchsia ink, I'm going to ink up my stamp, and I'm going to stamp that on the vellum. Bring over my embossing tray, and with some clear embossing powder, I'm going to pour that over. And now with my heat gun set on high, I'm going to emboss my image. Be really careful when you're embossing on vellum. It can buckle, it can warp, so you want to do it as quickly as possible. Let your heat tool heat up for just a few seconds, and then as soon as you see that powder begin to melt, then stop embossing. So here are those words. And then I made those creases on my clouds so that I would know where to stamp the word sparkles. So kind of in the lower right hand corner, I'm going to do the same thing, stamp that out, pour on the clear embossing powder, and heat emboss. So here's my vellum embossed. I love that bright, shiny pink color. Going back to my die cut oval, I'm going to kind of center the words where I would like them to be. I'm going to take some just regular Scotch tape, and I'm just going to tape the vellum down all the way around. Now I'm ready to adhere my vellum down, and I don't want any adhesive to show on the front, which is why I wrapped it around. So I'm just going to wrap that around to the back, and again with some regular Scotch tape, I'm just going to tape that in place. To make the barrier for the back of my shaker card, I have these really great thin foam strips, and I'm just going to place them kind of close to the oval in the back and just trim them off to fit and just make a little bit of a box. You just want to make sure that there aren't any gaps in here so that whatever you put inside your sequins and everything are not going to be able to escape. If you don't have any of these foam strips, you can use regular foam tape, and you can actually kind of just cut it in half and kind of create your own strips. So I'm going to set this aside for now. And I've got a piece of 110-pound white cardstock. I'm moving on to the black pigment ink, and I'm going to stamp out my little unicorn and the two fairies. And just like I did with the pink, I'm going to take clear embossing powder and pour that over my images and heat them with my embossing gun. I absolutely love that bright shiny outline that embossing adds. I hope you can see that on camera. For my coloring, I'm using Stampin' Blends markers. These are alcohol-based markers. I'm using light crumb cake, and I'm just going to outline the inside of that unicorn. And if you are somebody that has trouble with your coloring bleeding outside of the lines, then using heat embossing is a really great way to kind of have an added barrier there, and your color won't bleed outside the lines. I'm taking a clear blender pen, and I'm just going to soften that color and sort of pull it towards the center. So it still looks like it's kind of a white unicorn, but it's got a little bit of shading and shadowing to it. Using the same light crumb cake marker, I'm going to color in my little fairy's hair. With dark purple posy, I'm going to be coloring in some of the tail and the mane and the horn on my unicorn. I'm going to move on to light posy. Also going to color one of the dresses of the little fairies in that color. Moving on to light rich razzleberry. While I had the light posy, I forgot to do the little hooves and the inside of his ear. And with a dark posy, I'm going to do the other fairy's dress. Using ivory to do their little faces, arms, and feet. And a light daffodil delight for their wings. Using repositionable tape, I'm going to place my dies over and die cut all my images in my die cutting machine. I've applied tape runner to my square of purple gray. I'm going to place that in the center of my card base. I've got a mixture of sequins here. They're kind of like purple and pink and blue sequins with some gold stars. I'm just going to place those in a little pile in the center. I've removed the backing from my foam strips, and I'm just going to center that over top of my gray. So now you can see all those fun sequins inside, and I decided to use vellum because I thought it gave more of a soft cloudy look, and I really liked the way that the embossing looked on it. I've added foam squares to the back of my little unicorn. I'm going to place him in the clouds and also on the back of my little fairies. And here is our finished shaker card. I really, really love these new ink pads from Spectrum Noir. These Harmony Opaque Pigments have a lot of really rich color. They're really perfect for ink blending and heat embossing. So I hope you enjoyed taking a look at these. If you liked this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up. Check out my channel and consider subscribing. And I hope you have a really magical day. This is Heather. Bye.